As most of you know, I'm Jennifer Zwilling. I'm the curator and director of artistic programs here at the Play Studio, and we're excited to be joined today by McCauley and Sharon Bartmann. And we are going to be talking about small favors and how they've both been involved for several years and what that might mean to their artistic practice. I'd like to recognize that the Clay Studio stands on the indigenous territory known as Lenapehoking, the traditional homeland of the Lenni Lenape people. We reflect on the role of the Lenape as the past and present stewards of the land and commit to joining in their tradition of respect and caring for the land and each other now and into the future. We are honored to have both of these amazing artists with us. Sharon Bartmann earned her BA from Temple University. Sharon has worked as the art director in Los Angeles and for the Philadelphia Zoo. After leaving the field of graphic design, Sharon began her life as a fine artist and instructor. She has taught for over 20 years at the Mainline Art Center and various residencies at schools, universities, and other art centers in the region. Sharon has continued to show and sell her work at galleries and shops nationwide. Her most recent work has branched out into mixed media and photography. And as with our guests from 2 weeks ago and both of you, every time we see a new small favor by some of our favorite small favors artists in every new year, we're always excited to see what we're going to get. So we'll get to see those in a few minutes when we see our slideshow. McCauley grew up in Chicagoland area. She spent a lot of time using air dry clay to make small models and countless hours drawing. She earned her BFA in illustration from Northern Illinois University. While at NIU, she took several ceramics classes and found a passion for the medium. Following graduation, after a year in Madison, Wisconsin, she spent several years in Chicago at Lil Street Art Center, where she began to lay the foundation for a ceramic career. In 2019, she accepted a residency at the Morian Center for Clay, where she stayed for 3 years. And she's currently living in St. Petersburg, Florida, running her own ceramic business. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to start with Sharon and ask the question that I ask everyone, which is, how and why did you make the brave decision to make your life in art?
I came from an artistic maker family, architects, my dad's an urban planner. I don't think it was ever thought not to follow the arts. I mean, there was no taboo around it. In fact, my sister went to law school and we all went, what? But I think it was just accepted and encouraged in my family. And I had, from working in the wood shop next to my dad when I was little, and my dad kind of leading us into projects and things, I think it just was a natural transition. So I did jump around a little bit. I did the art direction, graphic design, which I had done in college. I didn't realize I was doing it. I was doing it as a work study job and just fell into that world, which I really enjoyed. And then as it became a little more technical and too much computer for me, as far as I wanted to get back to working with my hands, I switched to clay through my kids at the Mainline Art Center. We were taking classes and I just kind of fell into it over 20 years ago and got addicted and just kind of went from there. But I've always kind of forged my own careers thinking, okay, I'll figure this out. And then, I'll sell stuff. I'll teach. And so it wasn't anything, I don't think, that I purposely said, I'm going to be an artist. It was just kind of where life led me. So yeah, it's been over 20 years and I love it.
Well, and even your earlier career was artistic, so.
True, yeah.
Do you feel like there were supports for you in school? Like your family was very supportive, but was it also something that when you were maybe in high school that your teachers were encouraging and you had good kind of programs to point you in the right direction?
I mean, I went to a tougher high school, so the arts were offered. We actually had some advanced classes, but it was mainly a lot of my classmates went on to trade. Very few went on to college. So they weren't saying, get a career in art, but there was enough offerings and I had fulfilled all my college preparatory courses by senior year so that I could take advanced fibers. I could jump into clay. I could jump into different classes. And for a school that was not in a wealthy area, they seemed to offer quite a bit of art. So I was able to pursue and kind of dabble and see what I like to do.
Did you you grew up in Philly or
No, I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania.
In where, sorry?
Reading,
Oh, in
Pennsylvania.
Reading. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my father was the urban planner. So we were exposed to art in all facets through just my family. We would come into Philly to go to the art museum. My parents weren't from there. They were from like the Syracuse area. And so they were very cultural forward with us. We had a lot of rules. We could not have coloring books. We could only have paper and crayons and drawing utensils. We couldn't have Barbie's Playhouse. We had to build Barbie's Playhouse, but my dad sat down and built it with us. So they were very conscious as to give us that creative platform. My brother is a successful painter. And so we were just kind of encouraged in everyday life to be creative.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah,
You weren't allowed to have coloring books.
It was frustrating as a child to bring your homemade Barbie camper to your friend who had this blinged out Barbie camper. But now looking back, I'm like, oh, that was amazing that they had the fortitude to do that. So
absolutely. I had a homemade Cabbage Patch Kid. It was not the same. Now I look at it and I'm like, wow, this thing is amazing. But at the time I was like, I looked at my mom and I was like, this is not what I want.
But I say too about Reading, growing up and going to their playgrounds. They had a whole playground program in the summer. No one could afford camp of any kind. It was free. And they were very inventive. I ended up being a camp leader as I got older. They had taken all the parts from all the factories, because it's a big factory town, and they would get old telephone wire or thread spools, and the whole art program was based on factory parts that we would then teach those activities and do those activities at the playground. So it was very resourceful. And I have to say that was probably a big influence of mixed media for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Just learning how to use what you find around you and put it together in different ways.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
You're three-dimensional collage, and now you're doing sort of three-dimensional collage.
Yes,
right?
correct. Yes. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Mm-hmm.
Claire, would you like to answer the same question?
Yeah. I think for me, it also wasn't exactly a conscious decision. From a very young age, I was working kind of like you said in the bio, I had a lot of model magic. We had gone to like a Crayola factory tour and they had given us little packets of this like model magic. And yeah, I spent like countless hours doing that. And yeah, I've been drawing forever. Yeah, didn't quite I wouldn't say that it was taboo to go into art, but I think like as a younger person, I was like, oh no, like I'll do art on the side, but like I should do something else. And then as I progressed through high school, those sort of like preconceived notions of like, oh, art's not for everybody. I was like, oh, well, maybe art could be for me. Yeah, I was really fortunate to go to a high school that had offered a lot of um, like auxiliary classes in art. So we had like a dark room, we had ceramics, we had jewelry making, and which I feel like now, and especially like down here in Florida, is unheard of. Um, I was super fortunate to have those opportunities. And yeah, I think what drives me is I love telling stories, and I wanted to continue to tell stories. You know, from here on out. And when I got my degree in illustration, my idea was, go into children's books and, do that. And that's definitely not off the table. And I have worked with a local person here to do a children's book, but I think, the tactility of clay and working with that and being able to create stories and, continue making those narratives in clay is really appealing. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that. And, tomorrow will be a new day. And I hope that I can continue to do this forever. And, I'm going to do whatever I can to do that. Um, yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your transition from illustration to clay? Like, what was the first moment where you were like, oh, okay, this is the new thing?
It was in college. I had, like I said, I had like started off my degree in illustration. I had done some ceramic classes in high school. And yeah, I wanted to continue to do some clay in college. So my junior year, I had taken my first ceramics class at the college level and I loved it. Um, and then my second semester of my senior year, I was putting together my illustration portfolio, and my ceramics teacher that semester, Ewan Co, was like, "Oh, Claire, you should be a ceramics major." And I'm like, it is the second I'm graduating in like 3 months. There's no way in hell I'm jumping on for another year of this. If clay is for me, I'll find it outside. I'll find it after school. And yeah, after a year of, being out of school, I had taken when I lived up in Madison, I took a class at a community college just to keep my hands in clay. When I moved back to Chicago from Madison, a friend of my sister's was like, "Hey, like we should take a ceramics class." And I was like, "Oh, I know ceramics, but like sure, I'll take like the first time hand building class." And yeah, it was a class at Little Street Art Center. I was in Sean Klute's class, and he was like, "Oh, you haven't done this, isn't your first rodeo, is it?" And I'm like, "Nah." But yeah, after finding like truly finding like a good art center and a clay community, that was sort of like when it kind of clicked into place of like, okay, I enjoy being around people. I want to be around, you know, clay is such a unique community, and it's super open and loving and, inviting. And I fell in love with that. And when I was at Little Street, I, made friends there and started working at the front desk there and was able to put more time into clay. And, I'm still illustrating on ceramic vessels and stuff, but it's definitely more focused in clay now.
Yeah, that's great. And Yuan Fo is a resident alumni.
Oh,
He was here as a resident. Yeah. So that's another parallel because Sharon, your practice is very kind of has been supported by Mainline Art Center, right? You said that was the first place you took a class,
Yes.
and now you're teaching there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So do you think that community around clay is part of kind of what drew you in there?
Oh, for sure. And especially as teaching, I mean, you meet so many inspiring people, and I think people say don't teach, it'll ruin your work and things like that. But
I say that.
I think it's kind of a thing, like, don't get diverted from your
because it takes so much
of
time.
creating, right?
Yeah.
But I find it inspiring, especially like every semester you'll get somebody who hasn't touched clay since they were in high school, or somebody who's coming off of an illness that is trying to, overcome something, and you're just inspired. And you get to rediscover the beginning of clay over and over and over again. Because sometimes you get a little jilted. You've done it for a while and you're like, whatever. But I find it's super inspiring just to watch somebody else blossom, figure out their journey. And I think that's a really key thing to keep you going, because you can get stuck, like in any medium, you can get stuck. But when you see somebody else take a turn and you're like, wow, okay, what's my next chapter? They've gone from here to there in one semester. So I find teaching definitely, and the community in general, is so helpful and not afraid to share recipes for glaze or how they're doing something. And I think it's a very open community, I found anyway.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And both of you are involved in sort of other artistic spheres, and so you can probably see that difference. I mean, not that I'm like constantly patting ourselves on the back. The clay community is the best community, but It kind of is. It's fine.
Yeah,
We're all
for
friends
sure.
here.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna share my screen. Oops. I think I'm gonna share my screen. There we go. And we can look specifically at some of each of your small favors, and then your other work, and kind of talk a little bit about what drew you to apply to small favors in the first place, and what kind of keeps you coming back to want to do the show over and over again. I'm sorry, I spelled Sharon's name wrong, so I tried to add a pen. Can you see that it's like too big?
Okay,
Sorry.
not
I could have just not pointed that out, but I thought
Bartmann.
Okay, so these are Sharon's pieces from this year's Small Favors 2024. Do you want to talk a little bit about where your inspiration for the form and the images come from?
For sure. I love taking photos. So all the photography is original. But I mean, my family jokes, oh, she's stopping to take another picture. But I find that was another aspect of my creativity that I wanted to kind of bring to clay, coming from a graphic design background and not a traditional clay background. I think I had a different view of, I wasn't looking at always just glazes. I was looking at cold finishes. I had been doing mixed media, specifically in caustic collage for a few years, but separately. And then when Small Favors came along, I was like, because I think the thing about Small Favors is everything is so unique. And it's not necessarily traditional clay. There's some mugs and stuff here and there, but it's like mini sculptures. And so I think it gives you that freedom to experiment a little bit. I had also just taken a stoneware paper clay class. And I had these structures in my head, which would have been a little more difficult to do with traditional clay, but because paper clay has such different properties, you can do wet to wet, you can join dry to dry. I could build my slabs for my buildings and then attach them later, and they were much lighter because they were paper clay. And then doing my mixed media that I had been doing separately on top of the clay was another thing I had been wanting to try. And it's kind of like, because they're small and like a maquette, it feels a little bit safer than diving into a giant piece that you've never done before. So I think that was why I originally started trying my workout, experimenting a little bit with Small Favors. And I just love the whole concept of being able to own someone's art that maybe necessarily you couldn't afford a big piece, but I love to experiment and buy like small pieces so you can collect a little bit easier. And just the concept in general, I thought was really fun, being in these little glass cubes and seeing what everybody has created.
Yeah, I mean, that idea of democratization on both ends with people who are in the show. We have, accomplished artists like yourselves next to people in the school who maybe applied and, are just making great work, but are earlier in their play journey. And the fact that they get to be in the gallery with you all is really fun for them. So that's really nice. And then the price points are lower because pieces are smaller.
Right.
I should have said that these are the backs. Those are the reverse. That's why there's more. I just realized I didn't explain that.
Well, that's it, the glass cube too can be 3-dimensional, so you can see, or the plexi cube, you can see all around it. Yeah. And then this year I started doing some water towers because I've always been fascinated, by the shape of water towers. But it's an ability, just like Claire, it's a way to tell a story. And I find doing encaustic mixed media collage kind of tells a bigger story than just a glaze to me. So I like putting imagery on clay. And ironically, my students who are in clay have started taking encaustics. My encaustic students have jumped into my clay classes. So I've kind of created this community that's like experimenting with both, which didn't exist before. So that's kind of fun to see.
Oh, that's great. Well, that sounds like a good exhibition in itself.
Yeah,
different
yeah.
people working.
It's
in
been
that
good,
way.
yeah. And doing different things than I have. So it's been fun to watch.
So these are from last year, and I really feel like they don't they don't really need explanation, but perhaps there is more narrative behind them. I love the way you're playing with space in these. You know, they're these tiny objects, but you're getting like a concept of a long expanse and a grand space, even though it's contained in this little thing. So are you thinking of a specific narrative, or is it more about the
Well, I mean, I grew up, my father was an urban planner in an area that had a lot of urban decay. So I was always going around with him to empty lots, and it's ironic, you can see it in my brother's work as well. We're both drawn to the story of what happened to that area, and kind of the beauty of urban decay. So I think it's just what I've been exposed to. Since COVID, my work is a little bit more in abandoned buildings in the country because I'm a big hiker. But I've always seen such a beauty in every area of the city. So I always joke that if I go on a photo shoot, the city must not like me because I'm not showing the pretty parts for the tourism bureau. I'm kind of zeroing in on what happened what happened to these factories, what happened to the people that work there, what happened to the area in general, why is it blighted out, and it tells a story, and it kind of creates an understanding of what's been happening in the past decade in our country. It was almost an effort to understand these areas as well, because I grew up in an area that now a lot of things are shut down, and how are these people surviving? And it's just fascinating to me, the story behind the history of it.
yeah, and they evoke those stories just, by the images that you're choosing. And I agree that urban decay is beautiful, and it's telling the story of our industrialization, and the implication of the people. I don't think I've ever seen a person in one of your images, but there's certainly, because they are all man-made structures,
Yes.
the understanding of like the absence of people is just as important as if there were people.
Correct. Yeah, because the majority of them are abandoned buildings. So, but they have such a sense of history and beauty to them that I like capturing. Even if they've been graffitied over, that tells a part of their story and their history.
And the textures and the images are, painterly in their own way.
Yeah, I do silk screening, so sometimes do silk screening on them, and I'll use cold finishes, 2-part rust medium, but they are for the most part coated in encaustic wax, which is kind of brings all the layers of the collage together, which I really like.
It's great. So these are the earliest ones that I grabbed images of, but and these are so different because they're still architectural, but you have the words included, which is
correct. Yeah.
So here's some of your other work. I imagine larger scale.
That's not too much larger. I actually have gotten from small favors attached to doing the smaller things. I find that people really appreciate the smaller ones too. So maybe these are probably maybe 5 inches as opposed to the 3 1/4, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it bears close looking because there's so much detail in your work that it creates a very intimate experience, which is very parallel in both of your works, actually, that you have to like really get close, and there's so much detail that you can spend a long time examining. So here's
this area up near Scranton area where the same thing had kind of occurred with their buildings and the farmland and what's happened to the American farmer and things like that over the years. So that one's probably about 12 inches long.
And you build the forms, you hand build the forms, and I think you said you bisque them and then.
Yeah, paper clay allows you to almost make templates and build the parts, let them set up, and then you simply can use some water to put them together. It has very different properties than traditional clay. So you can let everything get dry, totally 100% dry, and then put it together, which is very different than stoneware. So, and it makes the structures lighter. And again, this is more the farm buildings, going out into the country and doing photo shoots.
And here you're.
And that was on Route 209. That's why the 209.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yeah.
You're incorporating some like industrial. Is that a patent? It looks like a patent.
Yeah, that's just I'll go to flea markets. I'll get old, blueprint type thing that was like some kind of farm equipment thing. So I'll use various medium, and I've also started incorporating printmaking, doing some printmaking techniques as well, because that's what, as a result of teaching, I've had to expand my encaustic world from just photography, just so I have more to teach, and it's allowed me to incorporate that into my work as well.
So for people who aren't super familiar with the process, can you explain exactly? So you've got this bisque form, and then you print out the photograph, or you make a print on a special kind of paper, or talk us through that process.
That's traditional paper. The only thing I do is I use a good paper, a quality paper for printing, so you get the best color. But basically, I'm using it as a canvas, and then I'm using like gel matte medium as my glue, and I'm gluing down my initial photos, letting them dry, and then I'm going into the layering process. Encaustic wax is clear beeswax with a resin in it that makes it harden. Originally used for mummification, but it's become a popular art form, actually. And the beauty of using it and layering, silk screening, and other things is you can go back and you can incise into the wax. I think the picture before you showed like a reddish circle. You can carve into it, ironically using clay tools. I use a lot of clay tools, actually, the burnisher, and I use the carving tools. And you can just add color with oil sticks. You can add color with pestle. Just about everything is compatible with this encaustic medium. So it really gives you a chance to create a narrative that I wouldn't be able to get with traditional glaze, or even decal, because I did do decals for a while. But I just liked using the original photography and all the different mediums that I could use on a canvas onto clay.
Yeah, that is, I was thinking that because we, for instance, have a decal printer here. So I was thinking, the difference is, it's definitely the texture and the sheen of what it looks like is completely different.
It's just a cold finish as opposed to, and the patina as well is a cold finish. So it's just thinking beyond the glaze kiln and doing cold finishes. So it can be very experimental, which to me, clay building, as much as I love the engineering aspect of hand building, you have to think ahead. And this is more of a stream of consciousness creation when I do the surface. I'm not thinking as much as I am when I'm constructing the piece.
That makes sense. And you can change your mind.
Yeah. Yes, you can.
Very nice.
It's just not something you can do when you're a glaze buyer, right?
Correct.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. So we'll come back, and if anyone has questions about process or anything, we will save those for the end, but please think about your questions. So I think, Claire, do you want to talk us through, these are your pieces in this year's show, and then everyone gets to peek at the back. Although the cubes are clear, it's harder when they're installed to see the backs of them. So these are like beautiful little surprises for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought about sending like little mirrors, but I just by the time I had to send them, I didn't have time to grab mirrors. Each of these, so I really like working in this sort of like biome dome territory. When I was younger, my grandma used to make Fabergé eggs. We grew up like very Catholic, and so like we would get a little egg for our first communion. We would get an egg for our confirmation. We would, have all these different things. And my grandma would make a lot of like Christmas ornaments with eggs, like, regular chicken eggs, goose eggs, whatever. And yeah, so I've definitely always been drawn to like these sort of small enclosed narratives. Um, so I think like for me, I feel like Small Favors was sort of a very like, yeah, no brainer, not no brainer, but like, yeah, like, I'd love to do this show. I work normally I do work on a pretty small scale. So yeah, this was a very natural progression of what I wanted to do. Um, I don't mind working large, but I definitely think working on a small scale and having these details be as small as they are, it definitely kind of makes someone stop for a second and really have to like bring themselves into this like small world that you've created. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of what each of these are. I have been using a variety of these characters throughout my work um, over the past couple of years, in particular on the far right, this bear boy. Um, he has made an appearance in many of my pieces. He will be in another piece or two, possibly, that you'll see later on in both physical form and illustration. Um, he's sort of a reflection of, I think, like myself, my inner child, my inner consciousness. Um, and yeah, I think as I've progressed through the years, and I think you can kind of tell in some of the pieces throughout, like what you'll see next. I think one of the fun, challenging things about Small Favors is trying to give as much information, as much detail, or as many happy surprises with each of these pieces as possible. Um, when I was still a resident at the Morian Center for Clay, Mark Arold um, had a show and got a chance to talk with everyone. And he was talking about his pieces and um, talked about like turning them over and like, whenever you're holding a mug, this is a mug. I have seen everything on the side, but maybe you put something kind of on the inside or, you flip it over and there's like these small, like loving details that you don't notice at first. And so I feel like as I've progressed through clay, or clay and Small Favors, I've sort of tried to pay a little bit more attention to the entire thing and not just the focus of here is the scene.
Mm.
Uh,
Well, that's well illustrated here. I know there's probably one earlier piece, but these are 2018, and they definitely are super complex. And you can, this one especially, sort of, you get a sense that you can't really see everything. Just kind of another way to let the viewer have like more time to try to examine it and think like, well, it's always a little bit mysterious because you can't quite see all the way in the back, but the outsides are relatively simple compared to your later pieces for the show, which kind of seem to grow in different manners of complexity. And then with these that have their very, very elaborate drawings on the back. Is Bear Boy a boy who's wearing a bear costume, or is he just a little bear?
I think in my mind, he's a boy who's wearing a bear costume. But yeah, he, but he's like a little wild being, and you know, doesn't necessarily have to exist in, you know, he's always like out in the wilderness or out, like, existing in this sort of ambiguous space. Um, I definitely like I love traveling and stuff, and a lot of some of these pieces, he's holding these little houses, which kind of relates to Sharon a little bit. It's kind of a fun parallel. But yeah, just the idea of like finding where you belong, where home is. I grew up in the Midwest, but I feel like I've always been drawn uh, to the ocean, to the mountains, and trying to figure out why those poles are there. Um, but yeah, kind of using him as a vehicle to further discuss and kind of mull over those thoughts and why I'm feeling certain ways.
Sorry, excuse me. So is that what he's holding? He's got a little house in his hands.
Hmm
I feel like another, aspect of clay is that we're working out our worldviews and like what we wish for, what we see around us. And I think you're both definitely doing that, like creating the world from your perspective. And sometimes it's hopeful. Sometimes it's like acknowledging sadness and things, which is really important as well. Can you tell us about your little toadstool man too?
I think so. My relationship with the little mushroom guy, kind of stems from like a place of, oh, so some of the pieces a little bit later on, have to do with a friend that had passed away. Um, and so I feel like I've been challenging myself and kind of looking at my relationship with death in a very different way over the past since 2017 is when she passed. And so for me, the little toadstool guys, little mushroom guys are, this kind of acknowledgement of, things are, decay isn't always a bad thing. Um, a lot of mushrooms are growing off of the roots of trees that are no longer there. And, um, the beauty that can come from the end of something and, what can flourish.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely a good indicator of the life cycle, the natural life cycle. Yeah, that's really powerful. So this is one of your other pieces. It doesn't look like it's too much bigger. Again, you're both
No,
work pretty small.
it's it's this size. Um, but yeah, that's one of the more recent ones. Again, kind of that relationship with death and um it's Bear Boy again, but this idea of how much time you're given. Um, you know, it's beautiful and precious and each second we get is absolutely like, an honor to have, and we are not guaranteed anything. And in some of I have some other illustrations that I've done, trying to personify death and time in these kind of wild natured creatures. Um, but you know, it's a gift, it's a joy to have time and to be able to sit and reflect on the memories that you've made throughout your life. And yeah, I think that this will continue to be a strong theme throughout my work in the future. And yeah, and yeah, in this one, when I when working in illustration, you don't really have to obey the laws of gravity. And so with this piece and a few other ones, I'm definitely trying to, you know, push those boundaries. And so the little clocks and yeah, little spheres are kind of held up by wire, but in person, it kind of gives it this really interesting sort of depth and like weightlessness to it that I really enjoy.
I love that they're just really simple little yellow circles and just these two little incisions.
Mhm.
We all know exactly what it is. It's really simple things are powerful. Here are
Yeah.
your little bear boys.
The little guys, yeah. So I started on this project shortly a year after my friend Jenny Greenberg passed away. Um, on the anniversary of her death, I was trying to figure out the best way to honor her and um, celebrate her life because she was just this like magnetic person who was just, you know, all about like social change, and she was, not afraid to say exactly what she was thinking. And, she was the sun in like our universe of friends. Like she kept everybody together and like, was it's a shame that we don't have her anymore. So on her anniversary, I made a bunch of these little guys and walked around Chicago and just kind of placed them here and there. And just to be these little moments of happiness and joy that are sparked. Like, oh, what is that? That's crazy. And, she befriended everyone that, came across her path. And so I make these as little reminders of her, and I always give them away. They are meant to spread a little bit of love. They're tokens of appreciation and love and joy for everybody.
And I mean, it definitely translates. Like I said, we didn't know that story, and you sent us some, and we were like, oh, these are so great. You communicate it visually very, very well.
Thank you.
Is this one, what's the scale of this one?
It's probably like plate size. Yeah, so this is one of my larger pieces. I made this when I was at the Morian Center for Clay, and Matt Sheeman had challenged me to work outside of the dome. I was very comfortable inside there, and was like, oh, you should try getting out of it a little bit more. And yeah, so this crab character is also a reoccurring character. And again, kind of in that aftermath of losing Jenny, I probably should have gone to therapy. But there's sort of this idea of like defending yourself a little bit. So that's kind of where this defending yourself when you are vulnerable. So, they got the big old claw that's like, don't mess with me, I'm tough. But it's like, please don't hurt me, I'm very fragile. So yeah, that's where this character comes from. And yeah, just kind of this swirling idea of both like, these emotions that are very natural and very, of course people are going to feel these things after loss, but feeling a little bit lost in those feelings.
Yeah, lost and trying to protect yourself kind of at the same time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's one more.
Yeah, and this one's a little bit a happier one. This is again kind of looking forward to the future and exploring. My husband and I got the chance to go out and do a big national parks road trip a couple years back, and yeah, this one is definitely from a place of joy and looking forward to exploring and getting out there. And I never want to be alone. I'm one of 5, and so I feel like I've grown up with just like people around me all the time. And so a lot of times I won't have my bear boy alone. I'll have like these little bunnies with, and yeah, so exploring with friends and looking forward to what comes next and what's just over the mountain.
Beautiful. I feel like the obvious question for both of you, so I'll go back to Sharon, is why have you chosen this form? You said that, Sharon, you're sort of branching out into these water towers, but it's very important that you have chosen the like very significant or like boiled down icon of a house for your images that have like these vast industrial spaces, but they're always grounded as a house.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was part of my home growing up in an area like that, but I think it's just also that a reminder to that these areas that are sometimes neglected or abandoned, were home to people at one point. I think it also goes back to me being very aware of architecture, building. My father was a historic preservationist, and just being aware of, what the building form brings as far as history and stories and, everything that encompasses. So I think it's just a building thing. I mean, I have a ton of architects in my family and wood builders and carpenters, and I've always been exposed to different structures, going around the city with my dad where I grew up. And, I knew, how important these were to history and storytelling of the whole town where I grew up, but just in the world in general. So, and then that sense of, this is home for me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, even that memory of you and your dad, it's like, that's part of your definition of your home,
Yeah,
like
for
your heart
sure.
home.
Yes, for sure.
And the icon of a house is, just as these photos imply humans, even though they don't have them, the icon of the house is another, basically, it's like an icon of a human, because we all yearn for home, I think.
Yes.
That's really beautiful. Did that essence, you've like boiled these things down to their essence, which is great.
Right. Yeah, and I think COVID to a certain extent brought all that on of, we were in our homes. How important are these homes? We were, these were a major part of our story for that whole period of time.
Yeah. And we really all, I think, well, I did, and I know a lot of other people sort of look around your house and think like, what am I doing? How am I affecting the rest of the planet with like whatever it is that I'm taking into my home? And how do the things around me affect my mood and my, I want to be surrounded by things that are made by hand and made by people I know and bring me joy. So
Yeah.
it's definitely easier to see that when you're there all the time. And then Claire, the same question for you. You just said it was hard for you to kind of think about breaking out of the dome form. And I know it's about that egg, but what else does that? I was just one thing before you answer. When you said the eggs, I was thinking my mom used to make these Christmas ornaments out of tuna cans. Did anyone else make those? Like you take both sides off, and like the ring of the tuna can, she would like line it with felt. It's a very like late 70s craft thing, and put little tiny scenes like little Christmas trees. And anyway,
I love that. That sounds amazing.
I hadn't thought of that.
I might have to try them.
Yeah.
Anyway, do you want to talk a little bit more about what it means to be enclosed in that space?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like I said, like these small enclosed areas are very safe. It's a very safe space. I think we all crave a little bit of like comfort and, you know, warm, cozy feelings. I think also like I want to think about it a little bit more, but I think also just kind of being a woman, having the capacity to um, create life within myself. I kind of see these as like these little lives that I can create. Like my husband and I are not planning on having kids, but like this is the kind of life that I can make within myself and create these little creatures, this journey for them to go and exist in the world.
Yeah, creation in a different light. What happened to Sharon? Okay, hopefully she'll come back. Oh, hold on, everyone.
And that's why we got the text.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I don't know. We'll see if she can come back. Does anyone have any questions? Let's see what's in the chat. We do have a question. Okay, first is Kay said her moment of joy was that she realized she hadn't missed small favors. Yeah. Carol has a question for Sharon. Hopefully she'll come back, but Kay has a question for Claire. Do you build your interiors before placing the exterior cap? If not, what's your, oh, she's back. Hi, Sharon.
Sorry, for some reason I just got cut off.
Oh, I don't know. That's so weird.
It just ended. Anyway,
Okay,
sorry.
well, you came back, so that's good. Okay, we have one question for Claire and we have one question for you. So we're doing Claire's and then we'll come back to you.
Okay.
Do you build your interiors before placing the exterior cap? And if not, what's your process to install the interior pieces?
So these are all the exteriors, these little domes are all thrown. So I'll throw the domes first and then I'll cut them open and then start from the very back of the piece and work my way forward. So I have to work with like, I'm gonna go blind someday. But I have to apply everything in before that's just the orders of operations. Yeah, I don't put the caps on. That might be a little bit easier. But I don't know. I found that this works for me, and
So
I kind of like that.
you throw it with like a closed form.
Yeah, yeah. I throw a closed form first, and then cut it open and add all the details afterwards.
Maybe is there something about inserting things into the closed space that feels more evocative? Maybe.
Hmm.
I don't know. Because it does seem
Yeah.
like it's harder than if you just like paint it on the
I
base.
think I think also, at least like in a practicality standpoint, you know, if for like if I'm like looking at the one with the mushrooms, all those ferns, I can kind of push them against the back of the wall a little bit and then work them forward. So I think if I would worry if I had to put something on top of it like that, I would worry about, nipping the top of those really fragile structures.
Hmm.
Um, and so once they're in there, they're safe, they're, fastened into their spot, and kind of do a quick seal with some glaze during the glaze firing. But yeah,
Um, and someone asked about the tools, which was just what are you using tweezers or something to get them in
yep,
there?
just like a needle tool. Yeah, the one with the little like spear on the back
Mhm.
is my go-to. I'll like, scratch and touch the bottom, but like stick it on the spear and kind of smush it in. Um, but yeah, yeah. And then I've worked with the two clay bodies. So like I do have like a small jar of a mixture of stoneware and porcelain together because they have like slightly different shrink rates. So I think having that sort of mixture of the two clay bodies as like my slip has also helped then things not pop off.
Mm, okay, that's a good tip. And I love the sgraffito that you're working on over here. Okay, then Sharon.
Mhm.
Carol is asking, she says, I use clay at Surface 2, collaging and drawing on boxes and houses. I'm inspired by your work and will look into paper clay. Used it years ago and encaustic wax. Not a question, just thank you. She says thank you.
Good. I'm glad to have somebody else on board. It's a fun experiment, very experimental method. So it's fun.
Well, and it sounds like if Carol's near Mainline Art Center, she can come take a class with you.
Yeah, there you go.
I know where you are, Carol. Great. Does anyone else have questions? Anyone in the room? Okay. Well, this has been lovely. Again, I am so honored and it is my joy to get to talk to artists about what they do and how they feel about art and the world and hear about their moments of joy. So from Florida to California, I thank you for your time today and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for having us.
Yeah, it's been great. And nice to meet you, Claire.
Nice to meet you too, Sharon.
See, that's the other thing, more connections. That's that clay community.
Great.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.